balding. He ran one hand over the slightly thinning hair and squinted at his reflection in the mirror. In the toaster, sorry. He wasn't about to resort to a comb-over yet, and handsome was another overstatement, of course. But would people still recognize him anyway, somehow? Science Guy could refer to anyone from Bill Nye to a big farm researcher to some loner in a remote weather station. Edward was appalled, but he kept reading. In a couple of the other ads, placed by men, one declared himself a physician in his 40s, a world traveler and a gourmet, and the other a retired millionaire. So why would anyone choose to pursue Science Guy, an aging, balding middle school teacher with a basement laboratory to which he'd often retreated to cry like a baby, or to fantasize about cloning his dead wife from the DNA in the hairs still trapped in the bristles of her brush? There were 46 replies waiting for Science Guy in the post office box. Bee's children were thrilled, and Edward simply bewildered. He didn't think the person depicted in the ad, him, had sounded particularly appealing. He could only imagine how many responses that bon vivant of a doctor and the retired millionaire must have received. He'd spoken on the telephone with both Julie and Amanda after he'd seen the ad, chiding them for their impulsive act, which he pointed out was ill-conceived, if well-intended. "We don't want you to be alone, Dad," Amanda said. And Julie said, "Mom would have approved, I just know it." What was she talking about? Bea had been proprietary when it came to Edward, even a little jealous. Bruce Silver, her first husband and the father of her gung-ho children, had screwed around. It was a violation, she told Edward, that she had foolishly tolerated for a while, but never would again. When Bea and Edward wrote new wills about a year after they married, their lawyer half-jokingly mentioned something called the Floozy Clause to protect the children's inheritance against Edward ever remarrying unwisely and in haste. He'd laughed, but she had not. And he remembered her once reading aloud to him about a woman urging her husband to marry again after her death, but forbidding him to ever sleep with his new wife. Bea hadn't found that hilarious either. She might have preferred him lying down beside her in the earth to his starting up with a bunch of strange women. Amanda and Nick had had the New York Review letters forwarded to them, and they hand-delivered them to Edward that evening. Nick upended a grocery sack onto the kitchen table while Amanda opened her arms like a magician's assistant and said, "Ta-da!" Several of the envelopes fell onto the floor and slid away in different directions. Amanda scurried around the room, picking them all up and throwing them back onto the pile on the table. Then she ran her hands almost sensuously through them, sending some of them back onto the floor. Edward was reminded of those movies where the bank robbers lie in bed in a state of delirium, covering themselves with stolen bills. "Wait a minute," he said. "Hold it. I don't get this." "What don't you get?" Nick said. "You're the man." "An available man," Amanda added. "Go ahead and open one, please." He cleared his throat. "Listen," he said. "I'm sorry, but I'm not ready for this. And the whole thing's just not my style." "It's only a civilized, practical way to meet new people," Amanda said, and that pedantic tone she sometimes affected. How could he explain to them that even the word dating was a little abhorrent to him? But the main thing was that he didn't feel available. The ghost of his marriage still inhabited the house, even if Bea herself was missing. He knew he should have disposed of her clothing by now. At least he'd given the few valuable pieces of jewelry she'd owned to Amanda and Julie. Amanda was wearing the rose gold Victorian slide bracelet right then. But it wasn't just Bea's personal belongings that tugged him backward. All those commonplace domestic artifacts, dishes, lamps, pillows, books, were compelling souvenirs of the daily life they'd shared. How could he even think of someone else when he was constantly reminded of what he'd had and lost? "Dad, Dad," Amanda said, "you're not listening." She was holding up a fan of envelopes. "Pick a card, any card." Her eyes were shining with merriment, the bracelet winking from her wrist. Edward reached out and plucked an envelope from her grasp. When Nick and Amanda continued to gaze at him expectantly, He took a paring knife from the rack on this counter and slid open the envelope. There was a rush of a sweetly floral scent, as if he pulled a stopper out of a perfume bottle. "Ooh la la," Amanda said, and Edward forced himself to smile at her before he put on his glasses and opened the folded note. "Dear S.G., it said, your ad intrigued me. I am widowed too, and my late husband was also a man of science, with his own pharmacy, until Duane Reade took over Hackensack in the world. I know that dating after death isn't easy, but we should give it a try, no? Sincerely, Eleanor Perkins." There was a snapshot in the envelope, too, taken from a distance, of a woman standing near a tree with a house in the background. Amanda took it from him. "I can hardly make her out," she complained, squinting at the photo. "Why didn't you just send an aerial view?" Nick took the magnifying glass from the pencil holder on the counter and peered through it at the photo. "Not bad," he said. "Late 50s, I'd guess." Amanda grabbed the magnifying glass. She said. "Nice legs, actually. And that doesn't look like the state loony bin behind her. Dad, I hope you're not going to wear that doggy eyeglass chain on a date." They continued to comment, but their voices seemed to recede into the background, dimmed by the refrigerator's hum, the distant sounds of traffic on the turnpike, and the mating call of some denizen of the woods behind the house. Dating after death, Edward thought grimly. That's a good one.